So Terminators are toughness 5 and get a 4 plus invul now. Weapon changes are everywhere, and we've got some brand new special rules such as anti and a rapid ingress stratagem. Let's talk about some exciting new details for 10th edition. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today we're talking Terminators. Games Workshop has given us a rather meaty preview for the entire Terminator datasheet. That in itself is rather interesting, with a whole bunch of stats, weapon profiles, special rules and keywords, but they've also shown us off a few special rules as well. Probably the biggest headlines are that the Terminators are much tougher at base. Looks like they get toughness 5 and a 4 plus invul now. We've got some interesting stats and abilities for them as well, and they've previewed a few special rules, including the anti-special rule, rapid ingress and rapid fire weapons, and also given us a few hints as to the Space Marine special rule, Oath of Moment. Let's go through everything in order and talk about what we've got. So first up, here we have the stylish new 10th edition datasheet for the Terminators, only the second proper datasheet that we've seen for 10th edition so far, the first one being the Termagants, which was kind of simple and straightforward. I guess these guys are some of the poster boys of 10th edition, and maybe not too surprised that their rules have gotten a bit of a glow up. Let's go through the datasheet and unpack it bit by bit. First up, we've got their raw stats. A bunch of it's maybe not too unexpected. They've got a movement of 5, they've still got their 2 plus save, they've only got objective control 1 compared with things like troops like intercessors that get 2, and it looks like they're also leadership 6 plus, also the same as the intercessor squad. We now know that you test on 2d6 and you have to get a 6 or more. There are a couple of surprises here though. They've gone up to a toughness of 5 rather than toughness 4. They're no longer going to be lorded it over by the Gravis armor, it would seem. I guess maybe this might be an example of Games Workshop saying that toughnesses across the board might be going up a bit. They did say that the toughest things around might be toughness 12 now, so toughness 5 might be a bit more midfield than it is right now. It looks like the invulnerable save is now recorded on the bottom right of the abilities section. The standard Terminators now have a 4 plus invul save, it would seem. That's really quite a big improvement, and I guess that means that standard Terminators might not be quite as far behind things like Storm Shields now. Obviously the stats sound impressive, but we will be getting new points costs for these guys as well. It's perfectly possible they could have cost quite a lot more points in the new edition. They definitely look like they are going to be markedly more tough than they are at the moment though. Maybe not too unsurprising given a massive hulking new profile. Next up, we've got a bunch of core abilities and keywords. On their standard abilities, they now have Deep Strike built in, a generic special rule rather than having to specify it in a different way per codex. We don't 100% know whether that's changed or not yet. Also listed here is the Space Marine specific faction rule called Oath of Moment. I believe that this one's likely to be on their detachments, so it's kind of interesting to see it crop up on the datasheets as well. I'd guess that that means that this might be just common to Space Marines in general, and then the different detachments will add on an extra special rule on top of that, such as maybe the combat doctrines that we heard about for the Gladius Force. This is the first time that we've seen the generic Space Marine keywords as well. It looks like the faction keyword for them is just going to be Adeptus Astartes, and that might kind of imply that all Space Marines are going to be under one banner, including slightly more divergent ones like the Dark Angels and Blood Angels. I'd guess that they'd still be under the banner of Astartes here. I'm still kind of interested as to how they're going to implement those, whether they'll be full factions in their own right, or if they'll just be treated as any other Space Marines, or get some specific detachments to give them their own special rules. The keywords maybe aren't too unsurprising. They've got Infantry, Terminator, and Terminator Squad, all the ones that you'd expect. They don't have core, as that really doesn't seem to be a thing at the moment in 10th edition from the datasheets that we've seen. And they also don't have Primaris. After all, Games Workshop did say they could represent both Primaris and Firstborn in here. Out of the keyword section though, I think that the other most interesting thing is the Imperium keyword. Kind of interesting to see that that's on the generic keyword section as opposed to in the faction one. I guess for a while now they haven't generally liked you to run just mixed Imperium units with lots of ones from multiple different codexes. I guess putting this in this section may be more going to be something for Imperium wide buffs and debuffs, maybe things like Chaos Space Marines who might get bonuses against them for stratagems or something. In any case, it no longer looks like a faction keyword. Then moving on, we've got weapons, and we've got rather a lot of interesting ones previews. First up, we've got the Assault Cannon, who gets an ability called Devastating Wounds. The profile is kind of similar, but loses a pip of AP compared with currently. It's 24 inches, 6 attacks at Ballistic Skill 3+, at Strength 6, AP 0, and Damage 1. Another thing that is interesting to see on this one is that it doesn't have a heavy weapon characteristic. I don't know if heavy is just going to be a weapon profile that's gone from the game entirely, or to be fair, it could just literally be because the Terminator special weapons wouldn't get it, as in the past they've often had the ability to move and shoot without taking the heavy weapon penalty, at least before 8th and 9th. No idea what the devastating wounds rule might mean. It might be some sort of equivalent of the old rending maybe. Next up we've got the Cyclone missile launcher. This one's still got the multi-firing mode, and that's denoted by a bullet point now. The frag missile doesn't seem to have changed too much, 2d6 shots hitting on 3s at strength 4. It does appear to have the blast keyword still, so that looks like it's still a thing. And then the crack one has seen a small change, still 2 attacks hitting on 3s, though it's strength 9 now rather than strength 8. Again, maybe a bit more evidence of Games Workshop stretching the toughness system. We've then got the heavy flamer, which gets ignored cover and torrent. I guess torrent will be denoting the flamer weapons now. I'd guess that would probably be the auto hitting rule for them, and it's kind of cool that they do ignore cover again. I feel like that was something that they were missing for quite a while now. It was kind of a bit weird when they lost that rule in 8th and 9th. Otherwise, besides that, it's still pretty similar. Still 12 inches, d6 hits, strength 5, AP 1 and damage 1. The Storm Bolter is broadly unchanged. We'll get onto that in a second, but it's still rapid fire 2, 24 inches and strength 4. And then we've got the melee weapons. The Chain Fist gets 3 attacks, hits on only 4s, and is strength 8, AP 2 and damage 2. This one's got the anti-vehicle rule on 3+, which we'll go through in just a second. It's kind of interesting that the Chain Fist now gets weapon skill 4+ as opposed to weapon skill 3+ for the Power Fist here. I guess Games Workshop are considering the Chain Fist less wieldy than the standard Power Fist these days. The Power Fist gets 3 attacks, strength 8, AP 2 and damage 2. Again, maybe not the biggest change here, besides losing a bit of AP. Again, it really does look like a common theme of these 10th edition profiles is that AP is lost and toughness might go up a bit. In any case, still looks like a very good general purpose profile. Finally, we've got the power weapon, which gets 4 attacks, which I guess is denoting the sergeant's power there. It is interesting that there doesn't seem to be any obvious rules discrepancy between the sergeant and the rest of the squad, and there's power weapons listed with 4 attacks here, I guess to roll in the sergeant's extra one. In any case, this also hits on 3s, is strength 5, AP 2 and damage 1. Quite a bit of interesting stuff here, only AP 2 going back down from 1, and it's interesting that this is noted as a power weapon as opposed to a power sword. I guess that's a fairly strong hint that things like power swords and axes might be going back to just having the one same profile again, rather than having minor differences. Might be a small amount of lost flavour from the slight differences there, but I kind of feel that just having one generic profile and not being too bothered about the exact weapon that's armed with is maybe not the worst thing in the world. Then we've got a couple of abilities. The first one is the Terminator's Teleport Homer, that little gizmo that they come with that got shot out of the sky in the reveal trailer. It looks like for this one you take the marker at the start of the game, put it anywhere on the board that's not in your opponent's deployment zone, and then once per game you can use the stratagem called Rapid Ingress, which we have had revealed and we'll get onto in just a second. That stratagem costs 0 CP, and it allows the Terminator units to set up within 3 inches of that marker, but not within 9 inches of the enemy. I guess that 9-inch stipulation sounds like Deep Strike will still be staying at that. It was a system that worked fairly well, I thought. Finally, for Terminator Datasheet things, we've got a rule called Fury of the First. This one's a 2-part special rule, and first up, each time a model in the unit makes an attack, you get to ignore any modifiers to the ballistic skill or weapon skill. That means they should have a pretty reliable damage output, and I guess this replaces the stratagem that they had before, whereas 1 command point for +1 to hits for Terminators. Then it's also got a second part. It sounds like the Space Marine Oath of Moment rule is going to allow you to target 1 unit in the game each turn. If the Terminators happen to be trying to take down that given unit, they get +1 to the hit roll against them, so a decent amount of extra damage there. From the context, it kind of sounds like the Space Marine Oath of Moment will probably give you a damage buff against that unit anyway. I don't know exactly what it might be yet, but I'm sure that adding an extra +1 to the hit into the mix isn't going to be the worst. It sounds like it kind of incentivizes Terminators to go off and take down the biggest, nastiest thing in the enemy's army. Overall, it's really quite a fun datasheet. I'd say that this one at least doesn't really feel dumbs down compared with the 8th and 9th edition ones that we've had. I guess perhaps Games Workshop aren't really compromising too much on the datasheets, as most of the rules that have been removed are from the main sections of the codex, and the datasheets might have the same or more rules on to compensate. The Terminator rules do look pretty exciting as well. They seem pretty indomitable with toughness 5 and a 4 plus invul. Obviously no real idea as to how effective they're going to be in game yet. We don't know the points costs or anything, but it seems like they've got the potential to be solid enough from this. Moving on though, it seems like that's not all, as we've got a bunch of special rules previewed as well. First up, Games Workshop have given us a couple of the weapon abilities. A few of them we might be able to guess a bit, but rapid fire weapons has changed a small amount. The way that this works now is that if you're in half range you get X amount more shots. So as with the Storm Bolter that was 2 attacks but rapid fire 2, so if you're within half range you get 4 shots rather than 2 of them. I guess technically this sounds like it might actually be a small nerf to the Storm Bolter, unless there's any other supporting rules, which I'd guess there probably aren't given what we know about 10th edition indexes. It sounds like you're now only going to be able to rapid fire Storm Bolters at 12 inches on Terminators, rather than the 24 that they get at the moment with their Bolter discipline. Still though, might not be the most single important thing, they generally do a fair bit more damage in melee anyway. Overall, from a change from the regular rapid fire rule that we've got at the moment, it's not really that big a deal. You certainly could just write all the rapid fire weapons again just to follow that format. I'm sure things like Hurricane Bolters will be getting 6 shots and then plus a bonus 6 if within half range. I guess this perhaps allows you to mess with things a little bit, say have more shots on the base profile or more shots on the rapid fire base if you do manage to get within half range. I guess you could use that to implement things like Orc Daka weapons maybe, where they only get a small amount of shots if they're within half range compared with full. It does look like we've seen a few mixed keyworded weapons as well on the weapon profile. It's not impossible that we could get things like assault rapid fire weapons potentially. There was an assault pistol one on the Termagant datasheet that we saw before. Next up we've got the anti-special rule, and this one was previewed on the Chain Fist. This one seems to be the special rule for any weapon that's perfectly tailored to taking down one given foe. In the case of the Chain Fist, that's most certainly vehicles, though I could imagine other things having this rule, like say maybe poison weapons. I feel like that could work quite well for things like Drukari, auto wounding on X. The way it works is that it specifies a keyword. For the Chain Fist that's vehicle, and on an X plus you get to score something called a critical wound. In the article they say that critical wound isn't a mortal wound or anything like that. We don't even know if they're still going to exist yet, but a critical wound is basically counting as an automatic success on the wound roll, the same as rolling a natural 6 to wound apparently. It means that for a Chain Fist, if you hit the target, then against literally any vehicle, including really tough ones, or at least a roll of a 3 plus, you'll automatically wound them. So I guess it's going to be a bit more relevant against big really tough things, compared with light vehicles that you might well wound on a 3 anyway. Just in general with this rule, it looks like the tougher the target, the more value that you'll get out of it. I'm sure we will get other examples as well. Could be a way of making a tailored weapon for fighting things like demons, or gunning down infantry well with things like poison weapons. Finally, we've got some new Deep Strike rules. As we heard before, Games Workshop have renamed the standard teleport arrival from reserves type thing to be Deep Strike. We don't 100% know if it's going to function in the exact same way as it does now, but it seems quite likely that we're still going to be having our troops arrive 9 inches away from the enemy or more, at least by that Terminator rule. The interesting thing that they have previewed regarding Deep Strike though is a stratagem called Rapid Ingress. This one's going to be a core stratagem that any army can access within 10th edition, so quite a relevant one to know I guess if you've got some deep strikers. And it's basically a stratagem that allows a deep strike unit to be set up on the board within your opponent's movement phase, basically coming down after they've moved their models. It's interesting that it's a stratagem broken down into a bunch of different sections as well. It tells you when, the target, the effect and restrictions. Quite a helpful breakdown that it seems like it'd be hard to misinterpret. For this one they do specify that it's just one of your units in reserves, and the restrictions are that you can't use it to arrive on turns that you otherwise wouldn't be allowed to do so. I suspect like with Deep Strike at the moment, you probably can't use it to turn up on turn 1. I guess the idea behind this one will be that the opponent moves your units, then you put down your reserves somewhere really annoying to hopefully be in a good position to counter-attack them back in your turn. In general, I think for a lot of units that say jump out of Deep Strike and shoot things, it probably wouldn't make too much sense. They're not going to be getting any shooting damage on the second that they turn up, so you may as well just have them arrive in your own turn. I feel like it could be really quite interesting for melee damage dealers though. Basically you get to see where your opponent's moved, what their units can see to shoot or reach to charge and what they can't, and then basically have your unit turn up in the perfect place to punish them and counter-attack next turn. If your opponent's got a bunch of shooting units, then you could use this to arrive your unit hidden somewhere, ideally far forward but behind a ruin perhaps. Or if the enemy is a bunch of combat units, then you could potentially arrive this just out of 12 inches, and then in your turn you get to move up and then charge with your unit in your own turn. Seems like pretty nasty to have to deal with, to be honest, and I feel like in the right situation this could really get the jump on the enemy. Otherwise, I think it could also potentially be useful for things like objective purposes maybe. We don't know how the 10th edition missions are going to be scored, but if arriving early in the opponent's turn is enough to deny them some victory points perhaps, then it could easily be worth it just to do that alone. Overall, this one does look really quite a tricksy one. I think it's kind of hard to anticipate this one too well, to be honest. I feel like your opponent would just probably have to suffer with the consequences of it, and it really is quite a powerful boost to melee deep strike. Anyway though, I think we'll leave that there for today. Loads of really cool Terminator rules and a further bunch of clarification for all things 10th. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you make of the new stratagem and the big tough Terminators? If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Allspec Tactics, or I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new ones just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Allspec Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and that's the thing that allows me to keep on doing this as my main thing, making 40k videos all the time. If you are enjoying quite a bit and would like to help support, channel patrons do get a few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.